lost control of a $760,000 beachfront property in less than 24 hours because my Aunt Garrett slipped a forged quitclaim deed into the county recorder's office. Anonymous for the family's sake, though they earned none of that mercy. Story is real, names aren't. Quick context. I'm Hannah, age 34, female. I am a senior forensic accountant working out of Tampa, Florida, and I was appointed the sole executor of my grandfather's estate because the rest of my blood relatives would have torn each other to pieces over a single dollar bill. My grandfather, Frank, spent 40 years building a modest empire in coastal Florida. His pride and joy was a local marina and boat repair shop, which generated a steady, comfortable income. Along with the business, he owned a beautiful, paid-off 3-bedroom waterfront home valued at exactly $760,000 due to the skyrocketing Florida real estate market. I grew up spending my summers at that marina, scraping barnacles off docks and learning how to balance a ledger in my grandfather's cramped, salt-haired back office. My Aunt Garrett, however, viewed the marina as her personal trust fund. She was my mother's younger sister, a woman who wore oversized Michael Kors sunglasses indoors and drove a leased BMW she absolutely could not afford on her occasional wages as the marina's front desk bookkeeper. For the last 10 years of my grandfather's life, Garrett lived in a small apartment nearby, constantly complaining that her elder sibling, my mother, had received more financial help during college. This was completely false, but Garrett repeated it so often at family gatherings that she began to believe her own myth. She considered herself the golden child who had stayed close to home, while I was the cold, numbers-obsessed niece who moved away to the city. Whenever we all met for dinner at the local seafood grill, Garrett would make passive-aggressive remarks about my corporate job, calling me a pencil pusher who did not understand the blood, sweat, and tears of a real family business. Meanwhile, she was quietly charging her weekly Trader Joe's grocery hauls and high-end salon visits to the marina's commercial fuel account. My grandfather was too kind-hearted and increasingly too frail to confront her, so he looked the other way, hoping the family would stay together after he was gone. When my grandfather passed away at age 82, the mask completely came off. As the executor, I called a family meeting to review his will, which explicitly stated that the marina was to be sold to a local commercial operator, with the proceeds split evenly between my mother and Garrett. The $760,000 waterfront home was left entirely to me, as I had been the one paying the property taxes and maintenance fees out of my own pocket for the last 5 years to keep my grandfather from losing it during his illness. Garrett sat in the attorney's conference room, her eyes narrowed, tapping her manicured nails against the mahogany table. She did not cry once. Instead, she looked directly at me and said, "This will is completely outdated. Frank promised me that house. I took care of him while you were off playing corporate big shot, and I am not letting a 34-year-old accountant steal my birthright." I calmly reminded her that the will was executed legally, witnessed by 2 independent parties, and filed with the probate court. Garrett scoffed, gathered her designer handbag, and stormed out of the office. I thought that was the end of it, assuming she would file a standard, albeit meritless, will contest that our estate attorney could easily bat down. I underestimated how desperate and brazen my own blood relative could be. 2 days later, I drove out to my grandfather's house to begin inventorying his personal property for the estate archives. When I pulled into the crushed shell driveway, my jaw dropped. Garrett's leased BMW was parked under the carport. The front porch, which had always been decorated with my grandfather's vintage fishing buoys, was now covered in cheap plastic patio furniture. I walked up to the door and inserted my key, but the cylinder would not turn. Garrett had changed the locks. Before I could even knock, the door swung open. Garrett stood there holding a glass of iced tea, wearing an expression of smug triumph. She told me I was trespassing on private property and needed to leave immediately. When I informed her that I was the legal executor of the estate and the rightful owner of the house, she pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket and waved it in my face. It was a copy of a quitclaim deed, dated just 3 weeks before my grandfather passed away. A quitclaim deed is a legal document used to transfer real estate ownership quickly between family members without a full title search. This specific document stated that for the sum of $10, Frank had transferred 100% of his ownership, in the $760,000 property to Garrett. It bore my grandfather's shaky signature and an official notary public stamp from a local shipping store. Garrett smiled, her eyes cold. She told me the house belonged to her now, completely outside of the probate process, and there was nothing my fancy accounting degrees could do about it. She slammed the door in my face. I sat in my car, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I knew my grandfather would never have signed that house over to her. He valued fairness above all else, and he knew Garrett would sell the property within a month to fund her lifestyle. As a forensic accountant, my entire career is built on a single principle: people lie, but the paper trail never does. I did not call the police right away, because a utility bill or a filed deed makes property disputes a civil matter in the eyes of local law enforcement, and they would have just told us to take it to court. Instead, I drove straight to the county clerk's office and pulled the original filed image of the quitclaim deed. The document looked official at a glance, but under closer inspection, the red flags started waving. The notary public listed on the stamp was a young man named Tyler, who worked at a shipping and mail drop store down the street from the marina. The signature of my grandfather looked remarkably close to his actual handwriting, but it was too perfect, lacking the natural microscopic tremors caused by his advanced Parkinson's disease. I knew right then that Garrett had forged the signature, and somehow convinced this notary to stamp the document. Instead of rushing to court with assumptions, I decided to trigger a secret discovery process. I used my legal authority as the executor of the estate to launch a full financial audit of the family marina's books for the past 48 months. Since Garrett was the primary bookkeeper, she assumed the old desktop computer in the back office held the only copies of the financial records. What she did not know was that 3 years ago, I had set up an automatic, encrypted cloud backup of the entire accounting software system to protect my grandfather from data loss. Garrett had no idea the cloud backup even existed. I spent 3 straight nights fueled by black coffee, analyzing every single line item, bank transfer, and vendor invoice from the marina. What I found was a massive, systematic fraud scheme. Garrett had been operating a secondary set of books. She had created a fake vendor profile under the name Gand S. Marine Supplies, an LLC she had registered secretly using her daughter's maiden name. Over a 4-year period, Garrett had approved and paid exactly 27 fraudulent invoices to this fake company for parts that were never delivered. The total amount drained from my grandfather's business account was a staggering $142,400. She had been clever, keeping the individual invoices between $4,000 and $6,000 so they wouldn't trigger automatic alerts from the bank. But she left a digital fingerprint. Every single payment from the marina's account to Gand S. Marine Supplies was instantly transferred into a personal high-yield savings account held solely in Garrett's name at a regional credit union. She was using my grandfather's hard-earned business to fund her lifestyle, and she had forged the quitclaim deed because she knew that once he died and the business was sold, her multi-year cash cow would dry up. The missing piece of the puzzle was the notary, Tyler. Armed with the marina's bank statements showing a specific cash withdrawal of $5,000, just one day before the quitclaim deed was allegedly signed, I walked into the shipping store during a quiet Tuesday afternoon. Tyler was behind the counter, looking bored. I laid my corporate business card down, along with the certified estate executor documents and a copy of the forged deed. I looked him dead in the eye and used a calm, professional voice that I usually reserve for corporate fraudsters. I told him that I was conducting a federal-level estate audit and that we had already tracked a $5,000 cash payment from my aunt's account that matched the exact date of his notary stamp. I explained, very simply, that notary fraud involving a real estate transaction over $100,000 is a third-degree felony in the state of Florida, carrying a maximum sentence of 5 years in state prison. I told him he had exactly 5 minutes to tell me the truth before I walked across the street to the state attorney's office with my forensic report. Tyler's face drained of all color. He started sweating through his uniform shirt. Within 2 minutes, he cracked completely. He admitted that my grandfather was never present in the store. Garrett had brought the document in already signed, handed him a thick envelope containing $5,000 in cash, and told him my grandfather was too sick to leave the car. Tyler had taken the bribe and stamped the document. I pulled out my phone and recorded his full confession on video, with his explicit permission, in exchange for a written promise that I would not name him as a primary co-conspirator if he cooperated fully with our civil lawsuit. He signed a formal affidavit right there on the counter. Now I had the ultimate legal leverage, but I did not rush to file a standard lawsuit that would drag out in probate court for 2 years while Garrett lived rent-free in my grandfather's beautiful home. I wanted a swift, decisive, and entirely lawful execution that would completely dismantle her position before she even knew what hit her. Instead of attacking the deed first, I used the proof of the $142,400 embezzlement from the marina business. Because the marina was an active corporate entity under probate, as the executor, I had the immediate power to file an emergency ex parte motion, which is a legal request made to a judge without requiring the other party to be present, to freeze all assets tied to the fraud. I presented the forensic audit report, the cloud backup logs, the fake Gand S. Marine supplies corporate registration, and the direct bank routing trails to a circuit court judge. The judge was disgusted by the blatant elder financial abuse. Within 2 hours, the court issued an emergency injunction freezing every single bank account associated with Garrett, her daughter, and her sham LLC. Her personal savings account, which held exactly $84,300 of the stolen marina money, was locked instantly. Her checking account was frozen. Even her leased BMW payment bounced the following morning. While Garrett was frantic, trying to figure out why her debit cards were suddenly declining at the local grocery store, I executed the second phase of my plan. I filed an emergency action for ejectment and a quiet title lawsuit in the county court. A quiet title action is a specific legal lawsuit used to clear any challenges to a property's ownership and establish a clear title. Along with the lawsuit, I filed the notary's signed affidavit, and the video confession proving the quitclaim deed was a total forgery. Because the deed was demonstrably void ab initio, a legal term meaning the document was invalid from the very beginning due to fraud, the court issued an expedited order. The judge gave Garrett exactly 72 hours to vacate the $760,000 beachfront property or face immediate removal by the county sheriff. The climax of this family nightmare took place on a hot Friday afternoon. I stood at the edge of my grandfather's crushed shell driveway alongside 2 armed county sheriff's deputies. Garrett was forced to pack her life into cardboard boxes under the watchful eyes of law enforcement. She was screaming at the top of her lungs, her face bright red, her Michael Kors sunglasses crooked on her head. She called me a traitor, a snake, and a horrible niece who was ruining the family name over a simple misunderstanding. She kept shouting that Frank wanted her to have the house and that the paperwork was just a technicality. I did not yell back. I did not lose my temper. I simply stood there holding a clipboard with the certified court order. As she carried her final box of clothes to the curb, her phone rang. It was her bank, confirming that a civil theft judgment had been entered against her for the full $142,400 she had embezzled from the marina, and that her frozen $84,300 had been officially seized and transferred back to the estate account. The court also ordered her to pay an additional $22,000 to cover my forensic accounting fees and the estate's legal costs. She was completely broke, facing an unpayable judgment, and she had just been evicted from the house she tried to steal. She looked at me, realizing for the first time that her golden child status and emotional manipulation meant absolutely nothing against a meticulous paper trail and a dedicated court order. She climbed into her leased car, which was repossessed by the dealership less than a week later, and drove away, tears streaming down her face. Today, the waterfront house is safely back in the estate's hands, and the marina sale is proceeding smoothly to an outside buyer who will preserve my grandfather's legacy. My mother received her full, rightful share of the inheritance, and I am currently sitting on the back porch of the beautiful $760,000 home, listening to the waves crash against the shore. Garrett tried to use fraud to bypass her own father's wishes, but she learned the hard way that, when you fight a forensic accountant over a financial legacy, the numbers will always find the truth. Speaking of relatives who who think they can outsmart a paper trail. That reminds me of the time my cousin tried to hide a vintage car collection in an underground storage unit during a corporate bankruptcy proceeding, only to realize he had signed the lease using his own corporate credit card.